Hello and welcome to Future Squared. Stephen Hawking once said that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, so let's adapt. My name is Steve Goveski, and each week I'll bring you conversations with preeminent thought leaders from a variety of fields to help you think in a multidisciplinary way, kick goals in your professional and personal life, and better navigate what is fast becoming a brave, new world. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation accelerator that works with organizations to unlock their people's latent potential to create more impact for humanity and lead more fulfilling lives. If you need help driving your organization's innovation strategy, visit collectivecampus.io. And without further ado,
come with me if you want to live.
In today's age, it can be hard to find the time to sit down and learn more, especially if you've not yet turned off your push notifications like I've been telling you to. You might hear some of my author interviews and think, wow, I'd love to read that book, but with so many great books out there, you don't have the time to read them all. Well, there's one app I highly recommend, and it's called Blinkist. Blinkist takes the best key takeaways and need-to-know info from thousands of non-fiction books and condenses them down into just 15-minute reads. That's 900 seconds. Prefer to listen to books? Blinkist has you covered. As an advocate of short feedback loops, I like Blinkist because I can learn and apply key concepts to my business and life faster, which means I get results faster. I use Blinkist when I'm in the gym, pounding the pavement, and commuting. I've listened to books like Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari and Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman on Blinkist. Two books you should most definitely check out. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for Future Squared listeners. Go to blinkist.com/futuresquared to start your free 7-day trial. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/futuresquared to start your free 7-day trial. Blinkist.com/futuresquared. And now for today's guest.
If I only have a day left, if I only have a year left, am I using that year in a way that is aligned with who I am?
Welcome back to Future Squared for episode number 351 with Matt Belair. Matt Belair is a lifelong martial artist, knowledge seeker, and explorer. He's traveled the world to train with masters, which include meditating with monks in Nepal, training MMA in Thailand, and trekking Mount Everest and studying Shaolin Kung Fu with 34th Generation Shaolin Masters in China. He shares his knowledge in his podcast, the Matt Belair Podcast, Master Mind, Body, and Spirit, as well as his coaching, workshops, and programs. He's the author of Zen Athlete, a guide to self-mastery, which demystifies the art of mental training, flow, and peak performance. It's designed to empower world-class athletes, leaders, executives, peak performance junkies, and knowledge seekers with tried and tested strategies for achieving their highest potential in all areas of life. Matt and I covered a lot of ground in this conversation, including near-death experiences, flow states, how to smash self-limiting beliefs, how to overcome fears, visualization, meditation, habit forming, the philosopher of happiness, Epicurus, native elders, mixed martial arts, snowboarding, Australian motocross champions, and a hell of a lot more. So strap yourself in for a conversation with the Zen Athlete, Matt Belair. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me, Steve. It's great to be chatting with you again, man.
No, man, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you on Future Squared. It's been probably about 6 months since I was on your podcast, the Zen Athlete podcast, talking about employee to entrepreneur. And we're here today to talk about your book, Zen Athlete. But before we get into that, I've got a question for you. Did you just come out of a freezing cold lake somewhere in the wilderness of Canada?
In the winter, man. In the winter, I was in Nelson, British Columbia, snowboarding, and I was living in a yurt on the side of a mountain. And so during that winter, I decided to check out what cold training was all about. I like to see, if people are doing really challenging stuff, I want to see what it's like. So I spent the winter cold training. I think the worst day was, minus 30 with the windshield, and my beard froze immediately after getting out of the water. So I'm nice and warm warm now, man. I'm out of the water, but it was an experience for sure.
Nice and comfortable. It is summer now over in Canada, so my bad. But if anybody wants to know a little bit more about what I'm talking about, check out Matt's Instagram page. Oftentimes you'll find a story of him just neck to toe in freezing cold water, just pushing the limits of his mindset, which is what you're all about.
Yeah, man. I've always been curious about mind power, mind over matter, what we're capable of. And growing up a martial artist, I used to watch the movies where they break bricks and do all these kind of things. And I thought it was real at the time. And as I grew up, I was more curious. So I figured I would keep researching it and exploring. And I ended up actually training with Shaolin Masters in China. I've done quite extensive travel looking for superhumans. What's possible? How far can we push ourselves, whether it's athletics, performance, mindset, law of attraction, positive thinking, where does reality and process and technique meet the real world, and then where is it like fluff and imagination and impractical? And so that pursuit has definitely granted me some very interesting experiences.
Fantastic. And just on that, having unpacked a lot of these different sort of techniques or philosophies or ideas like, positive thinking and everything else, has your view on that sort of stuff sharpened to the point where you think that some of this stuff just isn't relevant, or there are merits to all of these different things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was actually reflecting because the podcast, you've been on it, and I've been blessed to speak with so many incredible people. I'm about 300 episodes. It's called the Mastermind, Body and Spirit Show. And, the Zen Athlete book around that is growing up being a trainer and a martial artist and working with a lot of extreme sports athletes, teaching them techniques that I learned through martial arts and really testing that. But upon reflecting with a friend, I was thinking, I was like, man, I don't know anything. I want to know the big answers in life. Who are we? Why are we here? What are the limits? Who is God? What is consciousness? What's my life purpose? All that kind of stuff. But in the pursuit, I think that it's come down to very simple principles. And when you get into like the really esoteric stuff, whether it's, esoteric, not really the same as like visualization, law of attraction, stuff like that, people can sell it a little bit more when you get into things like remote viewing, astral projection. But if you go into like, hippie stuff and you're going to see 5D and all kinds of craziness, I think that gets played up a little bit. And what really we need to learn how to do is quiet our mind and understand how to pull from our subconscious and decipher that on our own. So it's a long-winded way to say that I think it comes down to simple processes that when mastered can give you your own experiences of miracles, of serendipity, of really out there stuff that'll blow your mind, that it's the universe and you working with yourself in this state that's just for you. Like you have to earn it yourself. But it takes the mystical out of it. I think like there are some really out there mystical things that are possible, but like flow state, for example, flow state is such a huge topic now. It never was 10 years ago, a little bit. Now it's gone crazy, right? And so people will say, oh, you do this and that for flow state. Well, there are processes when I'm training a client or an athlete, if they're going to be in the Olympics or something, to increase the probability of flow state before a run, let's say an Olympic snowboard run where they got to put it all together. You can do processes that definitely help that in a massive way, but really flow state is earned. It's going to be everything that they did before that to get to that space right there. And as long as they're not in the mindset where they're going to self-sabotage, which is actually quite common as well, but you can easily fix that, the flow state's going to come from earning it. And I think it's an important piece to understand the bigger picture and really navigate the fluff from the stuff that works.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of important points there that we could unpack. And I think earning the flow state is something that don't think anybody's discussed on this podcast before. And I think it's a good point because you can only really get into that flow state when you're operating in an environment whereby something is a little bit more challenging than what your capacities are. But if you've not done the work, then you're going to find everything challenging. So getting into flow is going to be incredibly difficult. You're just going to find yourself frustrated more often than not, as opposed to being in flow.
Yeah, exactly. I say you can there's more ways in this, but two really common ways to go into flow state are, let's say, one is you're in a special circumstance where a lion is chasing you, or there's some sort of experience where you are forced into it. You're forced, and your body is going to react in a way that is using all of its capability through maybe conflict or something wild's happening. And you're just, oh my God, how did my body do that? How did I get out of that situation? How does a woman lift a car on fire to save her son? Like that's craziness. That's using with the universe, maybe flow state, maybe something else. I don't know, but that's an extraordinary experience. The other thing is you go, let's say, to a tennis match or a UFC match. Those are over long periods of time where martial arts is a really great example of it, because you can't go in there angry, and you can't go in there thinking like, I'm going to punch him as hard as I can, because it's this chess match of quickness, speed, agility, technique, mindset, trickery. There's so much stuff that goes to it. And what it requires is almost an empty mind, is that you are going to react. You're not thinking. You have to be able to react, and that's earned. And so when you can get really clear with your goals, where you'd like to go, put in the work, but also the big missing element people are not using is any kind of mental training or mental process. They're not learning how to clear their mind. They're not learning visualization. They're not learning what their internal dialogue is. Very simple things. And that missing piece really handicaps your ability. So when you just know the basics of the mental game, you know how to use them and you apply them, just like going to the gym consistently, cardio, whatever the case may be, you're going to increase your overall performance quite dramatically.
Yeah, and I like what you said there about mixed martial artists. I had the opportunity to catch Georges St. Pierre when he was in Melbourne a few months back, and he was saying that, there is no courage without fear. And he was talking about himself and saying that, before he gets into the octagon, he's scared. Of course he's scared. And if you come across a fighter who says that they're not scared, he basically said, well, they're either scared or they're crazy. But if they're crazy, then they're not going to make a very good fighter.
Yeah, man, it's a really good point. And I like what he said, there's no courage without fear. And it's so true. It's like we think that the people who are doing all these amazing things don't have any fear or any self-doubt or anything like that. They just have the ability to go beyond that. And they're testing themselves. So no matter where you are, you could test yourself. Let's say you're extremely overweight and you want to lose some weight, like test yourself by just walking the first half a mile. You know what I mean? And then over time, over 5 years or 10 years, you completely transform yourself. But we're looking for this immediate gratification in our culture without really thinking about just the simple processes. We get very confused with minutia and being pulled in a million different directions when, if we can get really clear and connected with who we are, with what we want to do, with processes that work over time, we're going to experience a much different trajectory in our lives.
Yeah, 100%, man. And what you said there kind of aligns with something that James Clear talked about in his book, Atomic Habits. If you're looking to get into the gym and go regularly, don't push for 90-minute workouts from day one or something like that, or full-on high-intensity interval training, 45-minute sessions from day one. Maybe just turn up 5 minutes a day for the next 5 days. And then you'll find yourself after, say, 5, 10, 15 days of doing that, telling yourself, well, I'm here anyway. I'm coming for 5 minutes. I may as well make it 10 and may as well make it 15. And like you said, people want that instant gratification. So they'll sign up to that gym membership. They'll go hard for a few days and then they'll tell themselves, oh man, this is just too much. I can't do this.
Yeah, man, 100%. And now we're starting to get a little bit into the psychology of things, but the brain is such a fascinating thing, and what we're capable of, and consciousness is such a fascinating thing. And, like in martial arts and some of the sports that I do, whether it's snowboarding and wanting to land a backflip over a jump, and then I can do a backflip. But like when I have this bigger jump, wow, like I haven't done this backflip over like this 70-foot jump, like that's massive. And I'm processing this in my mind, and I know it's possible and I know I can do it, but I'm pushing myself again, and I'm also risking my limbs. Even more so when an athlete is looking to do something that they've never done before themselves. Yeah. So let's say your first backflip or a trick that no one has ever done. And so I'll give you an example of working with somebody. His name's Brody Carmichael. He's a freestyle motocross rider in Australia. Awesome guy, super humble, great guy, absolutely incredible athlete. And he contacted me because I was working with his friend Pat Bowden, who's also an amazing FMX rider. Check them out. And they're both awesome Aussies.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, man, I heard you're good. You know what you're doing. I fell on a front flip, and I want to be able to land a front flip on a freaking motorcycle, but I also want to do these front flip variations. So we got on a call, and I was listening to what he was saying, and his mental game was strong. He didn't need massive tune-ups. He was doing pretty good. So I said, hey, man, you don't have to read my book, but I recommend it. It's going to help you because your mental game is pretty strong. I have some audios in there. You can listen to those too. They're going to help. But really, if you want to achieve this goal, because your mental game is strong right now, all you really have to do is you need to make a visualization of landing that front flip. Visualize it every single day until you know you can land it. It's probably going to take you a week, visualizing about an hour a day, and you'll get a sense like, okay, I got this now. So he did that instantly that day. 2 weeks later, in a competition, he lands a front flip. 3 weeks after that, he lands the world's first front flip heel clicker. And 3 weeks after that, he landed the world's first front flip Superman. And apparently he didn't try that once in a foam pit. He was just ready to go and landed it. And so that just shows you the power of getting very clear on a goal, but also using visualization correctly. It wasn't anything crazy, metaphysical. We didn't need to, call in anything wild. All we needed to do was visualize an outcome that we desired. Yeah. And so he just shared that. And so when it came to that point, when he had to do that thing where he had to get into quote unquote flow state, he earned it. He was prepared. His body already recognized what it was going to do. So he had way less fear going up the ramp, right? If you have a ton of fear and I'm about to do a backflip, or you're going to go do a presentation, or you're going to go do this thing, you're probably not going to perform at an optimal level. But with proper preparation in every way, mind, body, spirit, with a powerful perspective, your performance is going to be greatly enhanced.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say presentation as well, because every time I have to give a keynote, I spend at least 10 to 15 minutes visualizing, not just giving that talk, but absolutely every sort of step in that journey leading up to that talk as well, because I find myself being more of an ambivert. So sometimes if it's a huge crowd turning up to a forum somewhere and you see there's hundreds of people in the lobby just waiting to see you speak, that can be somewhat overwhelming. But actually visualizing turning up, seeing the crowd, signing in, getting your little lanyard, getting mic'd up, walking up to the stage, people clapping, like getting the clicker maybe not working and having to sort that stuff out. Visualizing every single step in that journey just means that when I'm actually doing it, I'm just living that visualization, and it's so much easier. Like there is no tension, there's no anxiety. I am just there to do my job.
Yeah, man, that's an awesome example. And to go back to George St. Pierre, he used to do that a lot. He would go into the ring and would visualize success. And he was one of the UFC fighters that kind of popularized that because he's whooping everybody. So in neuro-linguistic programming, which I'm sure you're familiar with, it's kind of like the study of excellence. If George St. Pierre is the best fighter in the world, you study, how does he talk? What language does he use? What are his habits? And what does he believe? And so you can kind of then use a framework for how excellence is created. And so visualization was a part of his process. And just like you're doing for presentations, when you go through that process, it's less daunting. And I also wanted to say, I wanted to honor your work because you came on my podcast and you shared, and it was very practical. And it takes a lot of courage to move towards entrepreneurship, to move towards what you're passionate about. That's going to take a lot of courage. And so for somebody to move towards that, to actually give it their all and create a massive impact, I just wanted to take a moment to honor you and your work and what you're doing, man, because I think that you're genuine and you're doing great work.
No, well, likewise, Matt, likewise. And that's why I've got you on the show, because I think we need to spread your message far and wide. And I guess just on visualization, so, I kind of talk through some of the steps that I go through when I am giving a keynote, but with respect to our audience, so whether they're giving a talk, whether they're trying to nail a jump, whatever the case may be, like what sort of key steps can we give them to better visualize a positive outcome?
Yeah, man, that's a fantastic question. And I'll kind of address it because, what in the work of the book Zen Athlete, and not to plug the book, is just to say that it's the process that I found that works. So for me in that book, it's just simple. There's no fluff. It's just, these are the things that I've researched that work, that aren't metaphysical, that it's not going to be a hard read. It's just, what does it work? So for straight up visualization, all you need to do is you got to learn how to clear your mind. Most people don't know how to do that. So just take in 3 deep breaths. Just practice that for a little bit. 3 deep breaths, all easy. Then you can imagine putting a lemon in your mind, and then all of a sudden you have a picture in mind. You can imagine that there's a big screen team in front of you. You can imagine you're in a theater. It doesn't matter. But I recommend going in two ways. The first is just to visualize in third person. So you're viewing yourself. So you would view yourself go on stage, seeing the audience. You can change all the camera angles. And this is especially good in sport because if I'm trying to learn a trick or I'm trying to do a trick that's never been done, you can kind of film it like, oh, this is what it's going to look like. Then it's very important to visualize in first person through your own eyes. And you want to make it as real as possible. See, feel, hear, sense, make it as real as you can. But a really key thing for visualization is just learn how to make your own visualizations. And you don't need to be a hypnotist. You don't need to do anything crazy. Hypnosis is only helping people relax their mind because they don't know how. So you're like, I can't quiet my mind. Okay, here, I'll come do sports hypnosis or hypnosis for you. All I'm going to do is give you a guided relaxation. It could be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It could be going through the senses. It doesn't really matter, but we're helping you quiet your mind. Then just walk your way through that visualization. So when it's something very simple like a sport, you can be very clear. It's a double backflip. It's a front flip heel clicker on your motorcycle. It's a presentation. It's a bigger goal. It's what your life looks like. It's an ideal mate. It doesn't matter. You just kind of plug that in and just record what the experience is like. And if you do that 3 or 4 times, once you go into the visualization, they're going to get better and better and better. And you're priming the mind, you're programming, and you are starting to create your reality on purpose. And most people create their reality on default. And the default setting is really triggered through fear. And that's what our culture is set up. And a lot of kind of, what your book addresses is, look, we can get these jobs, we can go down the path that were given to us, but it might not be inspiring. It might not be what fulfills us. And so it's going to take courage to say, hey, what does fulfill me? What do I want to learn? How do I begin to move in that direction? And so for each step of the way, you can visualize that process. You can visualize, just the very beginning steps. And then you can visualize the end steps. You might not even know what they are, but it could just be feeling more fulfilled being in, say, the sports arena or the entrepreneurship arena or personal development or whatever the case is, you fill in the blanks. And so just making guided recordings is really important. And so, in Zen Athlete, I give like the process of what I use and what I've seen great athletes use and famous entrepreneurs and everybody. It just comes down to really simple processes: goal setting, dedication, focus, meditation, visualization, belief, simulation, fitness, and nutrition. And if you can just take your goal, plant it in the middle, and do it from a perspective where you are complete, whole, and worthy and full of self-love, the best you can be in the process. So if you look at a 9-year-old kid, you're like, well, you're not good enough because you haven't gone to high school. And you go to high school, you're not good enough because you don't got straight A's. And then you go to university, well, you're not good enough yet because you don't have a doctorate. Well, now you got your PhD, you're not good enough because you don't have a successful practice. It never ends. So you're not good enough until you win the NBA championship, whatever the case is. So if you can navigate that experience, that growth, that process from a perspective and an understanding that you're complete where you are, and you're deciding, you're intending, and you're purposefully living and moving in a direction that you're defining, then I think that you're walking and experiencing life in a pretty aligned way, in a way that's a little bit more empowering than just going through the paces on default.
Yeah. And I think being aware of a lot of these sort of cognitive biases that kind of challenge our own sense of self, like the arrival fallacy, like we're never good enough. I mean, LeBron James potentially won't think he's good enough until he's won as many rings as Michael Jordan, right? And it's the same thing with all these awesome basketballers coming up. Like, you can always shift the goalpost, but really it's about reflecting on what is good enough. And just one more thing on visualization. One thing that I'm a big fan of is fear setting. So if something scares me, if I'm scared to go out for a surf because the waves are big, I'm like, well, look, there's a lot of people around. What's the worst possible thing that can happen? Like, that's a question I always ask myself. Well, look, I might make a fool of myself, but hey, if some big waves come out, I'll just hold onto my board and just paddle out slowly, and there's heaps of people around if anything goes wrong, so let's just do it. Like, worst possible outcome isn't that bad. And I remember watching a video of John Jones, the UFC champion fighter, and he was saying that not only does he visualize positive outcomes, but he visualizes negative outcomes. Like, he visualizes getting knocked out, emerging from that haze and then just having to deal with the aftermath and the press release and everything else. And he said, look, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to lose. I'm ready to win. I'm ready for everything. So he's visualized positives, he's visualized negatives, and that way he's just there to fight.
Yeah, man, that's a really great point of asking yourself, what is the worst case scenario? Because I'm reminded of a podcast that I did with Frank Ostaseski, and he's a co-founder of Zen Hospice. He wrote a book called The 5 Invitations, and he's helped thousands of people transition at their death. And there were the questions that he would ask them, like the 5 invitations of what was most important to you when you're about to die. And it had nothing to do with the things that we might think like, gain and things like that. But one of the main things was just not pursuing what we wanted, not having the guts to go for the things that we were passionate about. That was one of the regrets that would come up often. And I invite people to check out his book because it's really amazing. And I wish I could succinctly put the 5 invitations in there, but I haven't read it for a long time. Yeah. But it's a really fantastic book. But that point right there is understanding like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Well, you fail and then you get a job at it might be a crappy place, but we're not giving ourselves an opportunity to be as good as we can be. We would rather fail at something that we're passionate about. Not we, I don't know. Maybe it would be better if we would fail towards something we were passionate about than to never try at all. I think most people, at the end of the day would feel that way. And so if we just have the courage to take little tiny steps and realize, hey, worst case scenario, yeah, maybe I'd be homeless. Mm-hmm. But if you have if you have a pretty decent brain in there and you're willing to work for it, you probably get yourself out of homelessness. Yeah. And you could learn from that experience, but you're not going to just die. It's like, that would be the worst case scenario. I've actually had to consider that a few times in my journey. I'm like, oh God, it's getting pretty intense here. Like, what's going to happen? But it tests you. So really give yourself an opportunity to see how powerful you are. And it's going to take work. It's going to take effort. And it's going to take sustained effort. And also failure is a part of the process. Mm-hmm. If you skateboard or you do extreme sports, you realize failure is a lot of it. But eventually you will succeed. You only, as a quote I'm sure a lot of people have said, but you only fail when you give up, when you stop. Yep. Just keep motoring.
Yeah. And on people that have worked in hospice and, have had to basically transition a lot of people to the other side, a conversation I had with Michael Shermer from Skeptic Magazine, he's written quite a few New York Times bestselling books and he's researched this particular topic. And what he found was, yes, people regret not doing the things that they want to do, but they also regret not spending more time with family, with friends, having deep conversations. And I think that all comes back to, alignment, living a life that's aligned with what you actually value as a person. And I think one thing that becomes apparent to me, on my 35 and a half years on this planet is that people don't generally spend enough time really connecting with what is it that they truly value. And oftentimes we end up living a life that's in accordance with societal expectations of what we should be doing, living a life that's based on the whims of our biological predispositions and our fight or flight instincts and whatnot, and we end up 70 years old, maybe on our deathbeds, hopefully not that early, and just reflecting on, wow, I didn't really do any of the things that I wanted to do. I spent so much time in the office working late, making money, but I barely invested in my personal relationships. So I think taking that time to reflect on that, on what you really want out of life, rather than singing the song from someone else's songbook, singing your own song.
Absolutely, man. 100%. I don't think I could have said it any better. And I just totally agree with that because I think it's just like this setting that we have, and it is really culturally imposed. Sometimes it's through family, whatever the case is. But so many people are so busy, they don't pause to consider what is most important to them. How do you want to live your life? One of the questions I love to ask people when I start working with them, if it's a coaching scenario, is, what would you do if money were no object? If you just had $1 million a day, every single day for the rest of your life, what would you be doing? How would you spend your time? And Alan Watts has a really great talk on this, and he basically says the same thing. He's like, what would you do if money were no object? How would you spend your days? Do more of that and let money figure itself out rather than vice versa. And he in another talk, he's a little bit more firm with it. And he says, if you spend your time making money, you are absurd. And then he's like, it doesn't make any sense. And he puts it really eloquently, much better than I could, because the guy was a really amazing philosopher. But check it out. And he's basically saying, like, you start to skew the lines between happiness because you're equating the money with happiness. And so what happens over time is you're basically going to the job to make money to go buy the other things. He's just like, why don't you just go do the other things things, but it does require a shift in mindset, and it also requires, possibly having less and being okay with that. And it requires possibly spending a lot of time in uncertainty, building a reality that is going to be on your own accord. Like, you might fail, you might not succeed, but you might not succeed the first time or the second time or the third time or the fourth time. But as long as you don't give up and you're okay to work, I think culturally too, and like Canada, America, Europe, Australia, I'm sure would be common. I worked with the Indian guy at a hotel in Whistler, and I worked night shift there. And I remember one night we were talking, he's like, "Hey, Matt, like, if you ever need a ride, just let me know. Like, I can get a cab for you." He's like, I own the cab company. And I was like, "What?" I was like, "You own it?" He's like, "Yeah, I own it." I was like, "Why are you working here night shift as a janitor?" You know what I mean? As a or whatever that, I forget what they're called, but as the cleaning person. And he's just like, "Well, I didn't have that opportunity, and I want to give the best opportunity I can for, my family and the ones coming over." So that's just an extraordinary work ethic that I think is also necessary. Like, you don't have to go that hard. I think it's a balance, like you were saying before, like value of your friendships, of your health, of all the things, sport and all that kind of stuff, but also with the work ethic towards your goal. And that's a balance that you find for yourself. But if you're just working in a job that you're not inspired to do, you're not contributing in a way that inspires you, you're not learning or growing in a way that's aligned with you or inspired with you, then it's time to kind of consider, how do you shift, ask those real questions, and have the courage to take action towards what would be a little bit more meaningful by your own standards.
Yeah, and I mean, your book puts forward 19 powerful questions, which one of which was, if I could do anything in money, and I could not fail, what would it be? But then there's other questions in here like, what makes me the happiest? What is my dream? What interests me most? What is my passion? What do I need to be truly free? And I think sometimes it just comes back to listening to your body in many respects. Like, I find that my sense of emotional well-being is always highest after I've had a deep conversation, or after I've been down at the beach near the water, or after a workout. And it's just about being tuned into that stuff and doing more of that stuff. And potentially, like, if you can build a life around that stuff, like you are doing with your coaching, where you're coaching extreme athletes on topics that you enjoy, you're getting to spend a lot of time outdoors, doing the kinds of things you enjoy. Not generally, that's going to basically give you a much higher state of emotional well-being, but also your energy is going to be greater. You're going to be operating at a much higher level. And I can sense it in this conversation, like the energy you're bringing is a reflection of someone who has that alignment in their life.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Well, and it's interesting too, because my partner will often say, when I'm doing the podcast and I'm traveling and I spent the summer training with a Native American elder last summer, and it was one of the most extraordinary things. And that's why I couldn't be here last week. I was actually at his wedding and I forgot about it. And I drove like 12 hours?
Yep.
Yeah, it's 12 hours, but I was ready to go, man. I was all jacked up. I got just in case he said no, I left at 4:30 in the morning, but I was like, you know what? It worked out, man. I'm ready. But doing all these experiences it was mandatory to sacrifice something, and I had to do a lot of it in faith. And my process has not been easy. It's still a struggle in many ways, but I wouldn't trade the experiences that I've had and what I've learned and what I've done for anything. And I've had several near-death experiences. In the last one, the thought that went through my mind, I got caught on a really awkward spot in Sedona. We went up the wrong way, and I had to get my girlfriend down as well. But we basically both went through our death because I had to kind of do a leap of faith thing, and it was terrible. But the thought that that went through my mind was, I guess my work is done. And I don't say that in any other reason to know that it was a reflection of what I had been doing. And all I can say for myself and the way that I've navigated my experience on the planet is I tried to listen to the impulse that was myself, my intuition, my inner voice, whatever that was. I try to put that voice front and center in honor it in the face of fear. That's the only thing that I've done differently, I think, than most of my friends who I love, and I think they're amazing people. But I really put that forth, and I really pursue it with everything I have. And it's been a struggle. It's been challenging at times. I've run out of money many times and done it, but I wouldn't trade those experiences. You know, when I'm ready to eat it, it was like, okay, you know, you had a good run. Good job for trying to stay true to yourself. And maybe that's a better way to put it, you know. And when you talked a little bit at the beginning, what are your values? Write those down. Write down what you value most. What do you want to experience here? Make a bucket list, you know, and then start ticking it off. How can you just navigate things? And we don't give ourselves enough credit for how powerful we are. You know, once you write it down and you get really clear, maybe you can figure out if you're working 60 hours, you can work 40 hours. You start letting go of some things. And then now you got more time on weekends to do whatever the heck you want to do. You slowly transition, and also give yourself 10 years to do it. I always wanted everything immediately. But if you if you never played guitar once in your life, if you practice 1 hour a day for 10 years, you're going to be pretty darn good. If you like surfing, you're like, oh, how would I make a life surfing? Well, there are many different ways, but you start to navigate and move towards that, take action, and it can come in so many different ways. But maybe you'd have much more happiness having a little surf ranch on the beach. Life's a little bit simpler, but you're involved in doing the thing that you love to do each and every day. And if you ever want to go back to what we consider the traditional 9 to 5, it will always be waiting for you with open arms any day to come back. And that for me was cars. I was living in Whistler and I wanted to travel the world. I needed money. My buddy's like, hey, like you can make some money in cars. I was like, all right. Worked for a summer, made some dough, traveled to, Thailand, trained MMA there. I meditated with monks in Nepal. I trekked Mount Everest. I went to China, trained with 34th Generation Shaolin Masters, and I came back and I spent all of my money. So, I was like, all right, hey, do you want to work again? I was like, yeah, man. So I work again, worked in cars, saved up some money. Then I got some passive income going, and I haven't had to go back since, but it will be there if I need another dose of cash to continue to create what I'm most passionate about at the time.
Yeah, man. There's so much there that I can unpack. I mean, firstly, the near-death experience. I mean, how do you come back from that? Because, I mean, it's awesome to hear from you that when that moment came, you were like, well, I guess my work here is done. And there wasn't a hint of regret in what you said there. But having gone through that, I mean, how do you then just put yourself back in that situation where you may find yourself on the verge of death again?
Well, my partner was there with me too, and because it was a very serious situation. We went along. Basically, if you've been to Sedona, Bell Rock, you climb up it, but near the top, there's a wrong way to go. We went that way. We were following this guy, is like 6'3", and he had went the wrong way, and we're both pretty short. I'm like 5'9", and my partner's like 5'1", and so once we were there, I got stuck on the wall. I boosted her up and then to follow her, I basically screwed myself. And so as I'm sitting on the wall, knowing that I have to go put my foot back down to this part that I can't see, that's super thin. I've only got one point of contact. It's like a bowling ball. It's super soft. And so I know I have to kind of go down for it and end up being okay, getting down and getting her down as well. And it was a whole thing. But I asked her, I said, what did you think? I was like, did you go through your death? Because I certainly did. And she said, yeah. And she goes, I wish I had done a lot of things. And she is an amazing human being. She's a kindergarten teacher and just a fantastic human. And I learn a lot from her. She's a really beautiful person. And so the only difference I think there was that she didn't define what was most important to her and what she wants to experience in this life. That she kind of went down the track where she wanted to be a teacher, and she is a great teacher, and she did that, but she wasn't constantly going, what is it? What do I want to experience in this life? And I remember having conversations with my buddies in high school. What do you guys want to experience? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to travel? What do you want to do? And they were just thinking about the universities that they wanted to go to, not what they want to experience, explore. How do you want to be human? And to answer your question, I don't know if I completely understand it. I think that for that day, it was a process of like, holy shit, we're still here.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was. Holy crap that I'm still here. And then again, so one of the things things that I do constantly is I will rewrite my values, where I'm going, what are my goals. And so I have this big checklist that I do pretty constantly. And so that kind of keeps me in alignment. And then so what I did after that was I looked at that process. Am I aligned with who I am right now? Am I doing the things daily that are getting me closer to the goals that I'm setting for myself? And is it aligned with who I am? Am I doing it for my own reasons, right? Like sometimes I skateboard. I'm like, why the hell am I even skateboarding? It's like, well, it's because it's fun. It's something you enjoy doing. That's okay. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't need to be the best skater in the world anymore, but it's such an aggravating sport sometimes. You know, I was like, okay, cool. So if I'm not skateboarding or expressing myself in that way, you know, whether it's martial arts or music or podcasting, it's just getting into alignment there. So I think that reset, I'll happily send it to your listeners. I can put it in a document, but something I'll give the people that I'm coaching or for myself, it's a yearly thing, and it's just a checklist. I ask myself a whole bunch of questions, and I go back to make sure that those are all aligned, so that I'm doing the things and working towards. If I only have a day left, if I only have a year left, am I using that year in a way that is aligned with who I am?
Yeah. And I mean, you could also tweak that question around fear and say, well, if there was only one thing I could do in the next year, what would it be? And that really gets you to focus in on what is that one thing you value the most, rather than trying to do all these other things that, you know, the society basically conditions you to believe you should be doing. But, you know, some things that you talked about as well, like, reminds me of Epicurus. You mentioned earlier that, you know, just get yourself a little surf ranch on the water somewhere. If that's all you want to do, you can be close to the surf every single day. It's a simple life, but hey, it's in alignment with those values. And, you know, that goes back to Epicurus 2,000 years ago, where he essentially excused himself from Athenian society, didn't want to be a statesman, just wanted to live in a garden with his friends and have good conversations with, you know, simple food. But that's essentially today come to me and, you know, indulgence, you know, Epicureanism and whatnot. But at its core, it was about Epicurus deciding that, hey, here's what I truly value. It's my friendships. It's the simple life. It's the freedom that I don't need to be accountable to, you know, statesmen and senators and whatnot in Athens. And I can just live the life that I want to live. And, you know, these big questions have been asked for millennia, but for some reason, we keep coming back to this society whereby people just fall into the trap of doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, man. And I'm so glad you brought him up. He has such incredible work. And I love one of the quotes I reference for, sometimes that I got from him, but it basically goes along the lines. It's just like, you know, he's a philosopher. His main study was happiness. He probably did some other things, but he was one of the main philosophers on happiness. And he's like, when you're going to eat, see who's around. See if they'll eat with you. Like, that's just, you know, that was basically it. If you're going to have some lunch, just see if your buddies are around and have some lunch with them. And so it's just like, it's so simple and we complicate it. And that's why I think there's a movement towards minimalism and things like that. And we're living in a world that's really tough to like make the status quo, like to buy a house in any city in Canada, you know, unless I move somewhere small. I'm sure it's the same in Australia. How much money you have to make and how hard you have to work. I think it's like this balance, you know, and we can figure it out in our own way, and each person's going to have an individual process, but it's like, okay, how much money do I need to be happy? Great. Ideally, you're wealthy as crap. Ideally, you have so much money, but ideally, you don't have to sell your soul for it. Ideally, you're making a contribution and an income. I think that's premium. You're sorted out, you're financially stable, and you're making a positive impact by your own choosing. That is important. You know, I think that's great, but I think it does come with a process. And at the same time, there's nothing wrong with simple living. Maybe you can do the exact same thing, you know, I would rather work a coffee shop in Nelson, British Columbia or in Whistler, BC than make $200,000 a year in Toronto or $300,000 or $400,000. I could give a crap, because what am I doing? I'm waking up, I'm putting on a suit, I'm, you know, whatever the job might be. Unless I love the job, then I would do that. It'd change the story. But just for money's sake, it doesn't make any sense, because if I'm working at the coffee shop, I'm going to be snowboarding, you know, 6 days, 7 days a week. I'm going to be hanging out with my friends. I'm going to be in nature. All of those things that I value much more than just having financial means. So it's finding that balance for ourselves. And it comes down to our own value sets, our own inspirations, our own curiosities. How do you want to grow? What do you want to learn? And learning is so powerful, and finding those communities and being in those environments. And yeah, Epicurus had to do it back in the day in Athens. Had to be, maybe like Sydney, Australia, or New York or whatever. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to go in the burbs over here with my friends and live simpler, so I don't have all these additional stresses, and I'm going to enjoy my life. That makes sense. And we can do that to our own degree, and we can start to really, as we start, because it's not all laid out. I think that's an important thing, is like, you don't lay it out. It's like, this is how much I'm going to make and this is the way I'm going to do it. When you take step by step by step, it starts to unfold. It's like having a flashlight in pitch black, and spirit or nature or God or the universe or whatever force that I think ties us all together has like a guiding, helpful principle, but you need to take action. And as you begin to take action, the path unfolds. You learn what you got to learn, you do what you got to do, and you become the hero of your own story. But it does require you taking the steps.
Yeah. And 100%, man. And, for me, it all comes back to freedom from things and freedom to do things. And, you talked about making several $100,000s a year in Toronto, Canada, wearing a suit and whatnot. Now, for you, that is not freedom from things. It's not freedom from, the grind. It's not freedom from being accountable to someone else. And it also doesn't give you the freedom to do what you really want to do, to, snowboard 6 days a week, to hang out with your buddies, to have conversations like this. Like, that is essentially what your definition of success or living a life in accordance with your values is all about. Now, for someone else, they may truly gravitate towards that life as being an investment banker. Maybe they legitimately love that, and that's okay. But it is really about understanding the difference between, success on the outside, like how much money you make, versus, am I living a life that's in accordance with my values? And that could very well be in a pinstripe suit somewhere, on the 37th floor of an office tower, or it could be in that little surf ranch out in the wilderness somewhere where you have the most simple life, but you are the happiest you could be. So I think just a really big question for people to reflect on. But I think I wanted to just change tact and talk about self-limiting beliefs, which is something you talk about in your book, Matt. And nowadays, I think the stat is something like more than 90% of people, if not 95% of people who find themselves in positions of leadership or positions of influence feel like imposters. And a lot of that comes back to, childhood and upbringing and past experience and everything else, whereby we're led to believe, as you pointed out earlier, that we're just not good enough. But how can we help to, quell those inner voices that tell us that we're not good enough?
Yeah, man, really, really great question. And your last comment was excellent too. The only thing that I wanted to add with that is, there's a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And in that book, the master is a gas station attendant. And, he is living a simple life, and he's bestowing all these, wisdoms on this young person who, that's the whole story of the book. And so it really doesn't matter what you want to be. You could be anything. It doesn't matter, as long as by your own definition, you're doing it by your own motivations and values. Correct. That's the distinction. I think that's, a really, really great point that you made. I just wanted to share that. And, your question is fantastic, because what I've boiled it down to, and I've gone, like, if you listen to my podcast, it's 300 episodes, I go down the rabbit hole. I've been curious about why we have war on the planet, who is running the planet, what the heck is happening here? What is consciousness? What is God? Where are the origins of religion? I've been in Egypt with a Resident Science Foundation, studied with Native American elders, traveled over 30 countries, trying to figure out what the heck is happening on this planet. And I honestly have no freaking idea. But I have a general idea. But in those rabbit holes of what I've discovered as far as like superhuman performance. So when I was in China training with the Shaolin Masters, you can do a trick that will make a lot of people believe you can break brick and these different things, and it's a trick. It's not real. And there's that baloney is out there so often now, and especially with this new age movement, there's so many people hyping basic subconscious abilities, basic ability to quiet the mind and use visualization. I just see it as styling it up in a different way. Some people just, add 10 sheets of paper on, all these mystical things that happen, but really it's the same basic process. And so when we start to think about beliefs, and you want to empower yourself. You want to figure out mind power, and you want to influence your reality, like break stone. That's impossible. Do the Wim Hof, sit in -40. I didn't even do the Wim Hof. I just did it because I wanted to see what my body would do. And so and I like Wim Hof, and I think that his process is great, and I think breathing is great, but I wanted to do it for myself just to see what was possible. And I love people like him pushing the limits of human ability. So I just wanted to see if I could, and just did it through sheer willpower. But so in that idea of looking at how do we influence our reality through thought, how do we improve the quality of our consciousness, and how do we get rid of these freaking limiting beliefs and the things that are happening in our mind that are sabotaging us. So the very first thing that you need to learn how to do is quiet your mind. That is it. You have to learn how to quiet your mind, and you can do this literally with 1 minute a day. Just do that for a month and you'll get the process. Arnold Schwarzenegger said he did transcendental meditation for a year and then stopped. It's like learning how to ride a bicycle. And I'm totally okay with that because most people do not know how to quiet their mind. So they think that all of that spinning that's happening in the mind is just, it has to happen. There's no way out. But if you just go, you can do counting your breath. You can just there's a million different ways to do it, but just sit down anywhere and just watch your thought. Just observe your thoughts. Your mind's going to go nuts. It's not going to stop. It's just going to go nuts for a minute. Just let it do that, and then try again tomorrow. Let it do that, and over time you'll be able to increase the duration. But what you'll learn how to do is watch your thoughts. So the first way to understand your limiting beliefs is to watch what you're thinking. We're not paying attention to that. So that's what the mindfulness is is to watch the internal screen. What's that thing when you read it, when you're a newscaster?
Yeah, newscaster, yeah.
What's that thing called? What they read them?
Teleprompter.
That teleprompter of your mind. So that's what I was trying to figure out. So we're not aware of the teleprompter of our mind. So that's step one, right? The second thing would be like, okay, beliefs. What are my limiting beliefs? Just literally ask yourself, what are my beliefs around money? What are my beliefs around self-confidence? What are my beliefs around self-worth? Just write it down, brainstorm, just get it out. You don't have to complicate it. Just see what comes up. Okay, cool. Now you can install new beliefs. And this is where really empowerment comes from, and conscious programming. It takes intention and it takes thought. But the way that the mind works is like you might have a belief from childhood, from wherever the case might be, and that's going to be solid in there. Maybe your dad's like telling you forever you're not good enough, or this thing happened and you're not worthy. Whatever the case is, all of this stuff comes from childhood, and it will stay with you until you die, until you're 98. I've talked to a lot of older people in my life, younger people, and they have the same trauma forever unless they address those things. What is it, the thing that you want? So if I don't feel confident, what do I want? I want to feel confident. I want to feel comfortable in myself. I want to, whatever the case is. In NLP, it's really easy if it's like business or somebody you admire. Like for me, it's Bruce Lee. Well, what are Bruce Lee's beliefs? What are Bruce Lee's beliefs around life, around physical fitness, around martial arts, around acting, around pursuing goals, around universe and spirituality? And you can look at those and be like, you know what? I like A, B, C, D. I don't like that one. I don't like that one. Oh, I like these four. Boom, write them down. So now, again, you have these beliefs and these ideas and perspectives. So from there, you can either use affirmations, or you can use a deeper visualization, or what you would call hypnosis. But hypnosis is simply relaxing the mind, because most people don't know how. So 10, 9, 8, you're relaxing deeper and deeper, blah, blah, blah. It's really simple. And then you just put in the things that you want. And now you're encoding and you're changing the neurology of your brain. And there's a lot of science on it, and there's tons of great books out there. But I'm just interested in what works. How do we use a process that absolutely works? And when you do that over time, what happens is neural pruning. So that old belief of not being good enough, or not being able to do so-and-so, or whatever the case is, you start to switch that programming to the preferred belief, and you change your neurology. So you'll change your actions, and you'll change the results and the experiences you're having on the planet through your own doing, through understanding how you think and how your brain operates and taking different actions. Did that answer the question?
No, it definitely answered the question.
I was like, I didn't know if I was going to keep going. I was like, did I answer it or did I go? I think I did.
I think you answered the question, man. I mean, it ultimately comes back to reflection and taking the time to actually sit down, write down what those self-limiting beliefs are, determine what are these self-limiting beliefs based on. I mean, is that based on something legitimate, or is this just my biases? Is this just something my dad told me when I was a kid? Is this just because I was bullied in elementary school or primary school or whatever the case is? Like, what are these beliefs based on? And then have you got other evidence that you can point to in your life that basically suggests that those beliefs are just flawed? Like, you think that you're not a great public speaker, but every time you've given a talk, you've been surrounded by people afterwards wanting to shake your hand and tell you what a great job you did. It's like, clearly the evidence basically determines, or the evidence basically deems that those assumptions about yourself are just false. And by doing that, you can then replace those false self-limiting beliefs with something that's a lot more empowering.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that just reminded me of one more comment. When we were talking about the teleprompter, most people internal dialogue is the term for it. So people are not being cognizant of their internal dialogue. And if you can just learn how to be aware of that, and that's just a simple process. If you don't know how to quiet your mind, you are very much limited in the quality of your consciousness, in my view. I don't know if this is for sure for everybody, but in my view, because if you don't know how to quiet the mind, then it's harder to really understand what the internal dialogue is saying. But when you know how to quiet the mind, you're a little bit more cognizant of the internal dialogue coming up. And when the internal dialogue is limiting, then all you need to do is catch it. But the thing is, people don't know how to, we're not aware enough to catch it. And that's a big problem. But once you're aware to catch it, all you have to do is it's like, oh man, I'm not good enough for this. Oh man, what did I just say? I'm not good enough for this. Hold on. Okay. So what do I want? I want to know that I am capable of doing that. And so if you have like a bracelet, this is one of the things I do with my clients. Doesn't matter, business, anything, you take that bracelet off because it's external. You're now taking it out of the mind into the body, and the body has its own innate intelligence. I think the body is really the information system. The mind is kind of just this like limited processing system trying to figure out what the flying F is going on, but the body has a lot more of the intelligence. So when you take the bracelet off, you put it on the other wrist and you say, so what do I want? I want to feel confident in my ability to land this trick, to build a successful business, to make this presentation, whatever the case is. Happens again, you take the bracelet and you switch it again. And when I've done this with my clients, they say for the first day, they switch it on and off like crazy. But the next day, a lot less, next day less. And then by day 4 and 5, they're almost doing it only a few times a day. And that's how quick your neurology can change. But you got to know how to do it, and you got to know how to watch for it. But once you can do that, it's so easy, and you can do that with anything. And so it's really powerful, and it literally changes the neurology of your brain, and you begin encoding the software that you want. The brain is like their brain, the physical part is probably like the hardware, and your consciousness rewrites the software. And so as you change those, so what do I want? I want to feel confident. I want to generate business. I want 2 more clients. I want to develop these skills, whatever that positive enforcement is. That's the network you're going to be encoding in your brain to experience a different result, a different action, and a different experience.
100%, man, 100%. And, we're basically getting into the realm of neuroplasticity. I mean, the mind is malleable, and you can change your belief system. And if you change your belief system, well, then you change your actions, and your actions then determine your outcomes. And that's what this is all about. So if people want to learn more about the book, if they want to pick up a copy of the book, Zen Athlete, A Guide to Self-Mastery, they can do that over at Amazon.com. But before we wrap up for the day, Matt, I've got to throw you into our 3-question lightning round. Are you ready to rock and roll? I'm sure you're ready.
Yeah, man. Lay it on me.
Let's do this. Question number 1. If you could work for any company or anyone, who would it be and why?
I would work for Native American elder David Lone Bear Senepass, who does not have a company, and I kind of work for him anyway. But this guy, if anyone I've ever met, is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. I invite people to check out his podcast. But his story was he spent his first 27 years on the side of a mountain being taught by over 600 elders from around the world. He was taught science, math, engineering, in which I vetted, and I visited him last summer and stayed there and haven't found a scientist or a person to call baloney. He's put balloons into outer space. He's working on a resonator. Apparently 4-foot tall one will power your house forever. It's ancient technology. He's the most fascinating person I've ever met. And I invite people to check him out because he needs help. I've been trying to help him. And I think he's genuine. And one of the reasons I'm very confident in this, because when I train with him, he's also a martial artist. This guy is like a Shaolin monk with poi. If you know those like dancing pois, they're like 3 foot. He has that of lead, and he's also got a 26-foot one on a knot. And like when I was first training with him, he would never show you this. He would never say this, but he gets me to play with it. I look at him. He looks like the Shaolin monks I was with in China, and that level of mastery comes over years of practice. It was absolutely unbelievable. And so that's the person I'd work with, because I think that as far as I've looked, I want to make a difference in the world. And whoever's out there who is doing anything positive, I don't care who you are, if you need help in any way, reach out to me. If you know of any great projects, any great people doing anything good for humanity, hit me up. I'll have them on my podcast. I'll support. I'll get my resources in there. Just let me know. So as far as I can see, this guy can do a lot of good. So that's my long-winded answer.
that was your not so lightning round answer. Love it nonetheless, man. Love it nonetheless. Question number 2: if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be, and what would you ask?
Oh my God, that's such a really great question. Wow, holy crap. Well, I wish I had 2 days to think about this, but so I don't have that. I think it would be Jesus or Buddha, and I would ask them. They would probably give me, the same answer, but it'd be something like, maybe like, who are you really? Where did you come from? What is the meaning of life? Who built the pyramids? Things like that. Yeah. I don't know. That's an amazing question.
Big existential questions. Love it.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And it's a question where if I was to ask you tomorrow, you'd probably say something completely different. So it's just one of those, man. But question.
Oh, bro, I'm going to think about this all night now. That's a great question.
You can come back to me tomorrow. I'll add it to the show notes. Question number 3, and this is all around. Well, I'm going to rephrase this one because we spent the last hour talking about rituals or routines, but I'd love to just dig a little bit deeper in terms of what your morning sort of routine looks like. Like what's the first hour of your day look like, Matt?
It's a really great question. So if I'm on point, when I'm like really, because it depends on where I travel and what I do, I'm all over the place. But when I'm really on point, I'll just give the most productive one so people can have that as a preferred model. And so I will wake up and I will journal. And 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things I want to call in. Then after that process, I'll write out like my ideal life, what I'm bringing forward. So I'll just write it out and have an enjoyable brainstorm session of what I'm creating, what I'm doing, seeing where my alignments are. Then I'll read my affirmations. Then I will do a visualization on those affirmations. So it's short. It's about 5 minutes, and it'll just basically replay the affirmations, but I will use the visualization and I'll bring in the emotion and the energy as much as I am capable. Then I will do some sort of reading or learning. So sometimes it's an online course, sometimes it's a book. I'll usually be doing this with a coffee. And then after that, I will sometimes meditate just for like 5 minutes. But a lot of the time now, recently, I'll go to the gym. So I do like a lot of nature stuff. So usually when I go in nature, I'll just take 5 minutes there. I think that nature is really the premium space to be. So if I know I'm going out there, I'll do it out there. Then I'll work out, and then I'll come back and go about the day.
Perfect, man. Sounds like a solid morning routine. Well, we are just about out of time, but this has been a fascinating conversation. And if people want to learn more and connect with you, they can do so over at zenathlete.com. They can hit you up on Twitter at Matt_Belair, Instagram at Matt Belair, and check you out. 300 plus episodes on the Matt Belair Podcast, Mastermind, Body, and Spirit. And of course, they can pick up Zen Athlete over at Amazon. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience before we wrap up, Matt?
Yeah, brother. First, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Get them to go to mattbelair.com because it's probably a little bit better because the podcast is there. But if they also go /masters-of-flow, I'll happily gift the ebook to those people. And there's also a heart journey hypnosis. And what this does is it hypnotizes you into your heart to get into alignment with your higher purpose, soul calling, whatever it is. And it's not anything mystical. It's literally just a guided process, but really helps with clarity. And I've done this with everyone from really, really successful entrepreneurs, athletes, regular Joes, and it helps bring you into alignment. And so that's my gift to you, because when you get into more alignment with who you are, with what lights you up, that inspires you, your community, and it's always something of service. When people are in alignment, they're never trying to rip people off, do anything that's harmful to someone or anyone else. So if you can get into alignment and make a contribution, I think that this is helpful for that and in your process. So just thank you so much for allowing me this time to share my work and what I do. And thank you for everything that you're doing and who you are. And just thanks to the listeners for spending this time with us.
Well, thank you, Matt. We'll add the Masters of Flow link to the show notes. And thank you for giving up the time. And thank you for your energy, spirit, and your contributions to the world. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure our audience will get a hell of a lot out of it.
Awesome, man. Thanks, brother.
Hi, guys. Steve again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to receive a weekly email from me, complete with reflections, books I've been reading, words of wisdom, and access to blogs, ebooks, and more that I'm publishing on a regular basis, just leave your details at futuresquared.xyz/subscribe and you'll receive the very next one. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, take a minute to like, share, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It goes a long way to giving the podcast the exposure it needs so I can continue bringing you guests and conversations of the highest caliber. You can catch me on Twitter at Steve Gliveski and on Instagram at TheSteveGliveski. Until next time.
Hasta la vista, baby.